Hello, innovators. Welcome to the next episode of my Essentials course series. This one's going to talk about least privilege IAM role permissions. Basically making sure that when we build roles, we're giving them the least amount of permissions that they need in order to be successful. Let's start by setting the scenario, like what's going on here, or at least what do I normally see going on here? I think everyone agrees least privilege is a good idea. Making sure that you don't just give away administrator access or give away resources that you don't need in a policy to your roles is a good idea. No one's really opposed to least privilege. The problem that I see is, one, we've got a bajillion things going on and it takes time to apply least privilege. And that when we try to do that, sometimes we try to make a role very light on permissions, but then we miss one and we hand off the role to some developer team or some admin team and they go, it's not working. This permission, this one particular permission or permission set is missing, and then you're having to go back and do rework. I also want to relate a little bit. I've had to go through this a lot in my career. Like, how do I make sure that I'm applying the least amount of privileges to a role? Because I feel as the administrator, as the architect, I have all this great power, and that, just like Spider-Man, comes with great responsibility, so I want to use it wisely. At a very high level, zooming all the way out for a moment, I use a tiered approach to how I build out roles that I give to people. So I like to start with a generic read-only or a view role that can see everything in the account so that people that are involved with the account can always go and see things at a bare minimum without having to ask somebody to shoulder surf or something insecure like that. The next tier up from that are the developers and the testers and the quality engineers working in the account, especially if this is a developer or a testing account, because I don't like to make it so that the only way a developer can work in these lower tier environments is through the pipeline. That's ideal. Everything should go through the pipeline, but there's also this raw experimentation that's necessary where you're going to want some kind of heavily scoped developer roles that can go in there and kick the tires on a few things really quickly without having to build out all the IAC and run it through a pipeline. So a developer and tester role with kind of more permissions, but not full admin, like a power user. And then the law, the administrators, with the administrative role that is really meant to be break glass. We're not using this or assuming it unless we need it. But there's an audit trail whenever we do. There's an alert when someone's using this role, right? We want to really lock this down, make it available to the SREs and admins that may need it, but not just using it as our daily driver. Let's start talking tools. And the first one I want to cover is the IAM Access Analyzer. Now, you can't walk 2 feet around the Amazon documentation without finding a bajillion references to the IAM Access Analyzer, especially if you're looking for least privilege type documentation. However, as a warning, if you're setting up a lab environment, this thing does cost a fair bit of cash to run. Because we have a well-architected multi-account structure, the amount of roles and users that we have across our organization can be non-trivial at times. And you can see here, I spent $2.20 in the month of March on just the Access Analyzer for a very small environment. So feel free to turn it on. It can be very handy for longer running services that you're trying to compress down to least privilege, but it's really not going to help you with net new roles because it's based on history of access into the environment. All right, with that out of the way, now let's switch gears and talk about Pike, which is probably one of my favorite tools for IAM policy generation with Terraform. Pike's goal in life is to make it simple to point the Pike tool at your Terraform modules and have policy erupt from that so that you don't need to guess as to what policy will make sure that Terraform module is able to execute and be built. Installing Pike is a snap. I use Scoop. As you all probably know, I talk about it way too much, but I use Scoop. So we just add a bucket for IAC from the author James here. His repository has that Scoop bucket. And then we do a Scoop install Pike. Otherwise, go check out the Pike documentation. He's got multiple other different ways to install the tool. Now we need a Terraform module for Pike to look at, and we're going to borrow the module that we built in the first video of this series where we set up the landing zone Terraform. Here we're building a budget, a bucket, a DynamoDB table, checking a role. There's a few things that we're doing in order to bootstrap the environment that we're going to have Pike take a look at by telling Pike to run a scan command, so Pike scan, and then telling it where the directory that contains the module lives, as well as using a -w for write. What we're telling Pike to do is go scan this module and then write the subsequent role and policy that needs to be generated in order for this plan to execute successfully. As you can see here, when we run that command, we get a .pike folder, and inside of that is a role Terraform file and a policy Terraform file. Here's what the role file looks like. It's just a role resource with a data call for the account ID, and then an attachment of a policy that's in the other file to this role, as well as outputting the ARN of the role that we're building. Probably more interesting is the policy file, and this is where Pike has assessed what's in the Terraform module and made sure that it's reflected in this policy. You can see here at the top, we have the budget information and then the DynamoDB table, and everything else follows after that. Now you could just grab this code and run it yourself. You can incorporate it by copying it and pasting it into whatever your module looks like. You can do whatever you want, but you have that baseline. Or you can just tell Pike to make the role and attach the policy to it if you choose. So maybe for your pipeline in a lower tier environment, you just have these things auto-generated and tested. The world is your oyster. Make sure to do an AWS SSO login into the AWS organization first, because that's how we're going to actually create the role. We're piggybacking off of the session that you have live, and then tell Pike to use the make command as well as the -d parameter pointing to where the Terraform module lives. As you can see here, there's the ARN for the role, because in the background, Pike is running its own little Terraform session using your credentials and then running an execute to create those resources on your behalf. But again, that's totally optional. You don't have to do this. You could just take the files or the code. This is just an interesting way to automate it if you choose. With the Pike make command complete, you can see here in my AWS console, I have a Terraform Pike role with a move to the end of the name, and then also attachment of a Terraform Pike policy that reflects the Terraform files that we saw earlier. Drilling in a little bit deeper into the policy, you can see this kind of pretty version of what's going on there, and it shows you the budget, the table, the IAM, the fact that we're getting the role, KMS and S3 all listed here. So you get a nice visual that you could maybe socialize with your friends or take a screenshot of, just so they can see like a more human-friendly version of it, but I wanted to show you what this looks like. The next tool I want to talk about is way less Terraform-centric. It doesn't really care what language you're using, and it's called Policy Sentry. Policy Sentry is also a policy generator of sorts, but it works a little bit differently. The high-level idea is that you generate a template that sort of asks you a series of questions. What services do you need access to? Where do you need to write and tag and things like that, right? You answer this template, and then you feed the template into their Policy Sentry tool, and it spits out a policy. So it's a two-part series here, and we'll cover that right now. First, from an installation perspective, it's just Python. So do a pip install policy_sentry and you'll have it, no problems. And then issue a policy_sentry-version as a sanity test and to make sure you're on the latest version. In case you're curious what that looks like, here's my example of installing it. Exciting times, I know. And version 0.14.0 is the latest at the time of this video. Start by issuing a Policy Sentry command, and I have it on the screen here. We're really just saying, create a template and some information on where the template goes and what type of template we're using. So this is the boilerplate example, and it's the one that I use as well. On the left side of the screen is what you're going to get. It's this YAML file that is fairly open, asking you, what is it you're trying to do? The idea being you and your developers and your team probably knows what resources they want to work on. They just don't know the policy way to express that. And so this is meant to be that middle ground where non-expert policy generators, which is most of us, can just go, this is what I want, and then we let Policy Sentry translate it. Here you can see I've edited my CRUD file, create, read, update, and delete, in case you're wondering what CRUD stands for. And I've said, I want to be able to write to this S3 bucket and to this DynamoDB table. And that's all I put in there, save the file, and then run a Policy Sentry write policy. So this time we're creating the policy and inputting the CRUD file as the input for the parameters. As you can see here at the top, I have my CRUD file with those two resources specified in the write block of the YAML file. And at the bottom, I'm issuing the Policy Sentry command to write the policy, and it's just outputting to my console because I haven't told it to go anywhere yet. I do want to point out a section of the policy just to show the reality of it, where I specified an S3 bucket and that I wanted to write to it. And here we get all the permissions that we need, and we're specifically naming the resource as a target. I think that's pretty cool. The last thing we need is testing, and I purposely put these in my videos because I think it's really important to be in a habit of testing what you build just to make sure. You should do it always. Again, I'm going to rewind the clock. We're going to go to the GitHub Actions video where we set up the OIDC secure connection between GitHub Actions and AWS, and that's using this GitHub Actions role. I've now attached the Terraform Pike policy that limits us to the S3 bucket and that DynamoDB table, and attached it to the GitHub Actions role. I've also built just a really simple testing pipeline to run in GitHub Actions. The statement on workflow dispatch means that this is manually run. We don't have to worry about triggering inadvertently. The steps are to check out the code. We're then going to assume that GitHub Actions role. We'll print a little bit of information about our connection. Then we'll try something we know we can do and something we know we shouldn't be able to do. Running this pipeline worked as expected, or I should say failed as expected, because the first step, we are successfully assuming the role and showing that. In the second step, we're running the S3 command against the bucket for holding our Terraform state, and we can see the sandbox folder inside of there, which is the name of this account. So we know that's good. And then the final step fails because we're running an EC2 command and there's no EC2 permissions assigned anywhere. So it tells us what we expect, that we are not authorized to perform the operation. Little positive affirmation here. You're doing great. I believe in you. Thanks for watching this video. I think leaning on some of these least privileged tools can make IAM policies a little less annoying and painful for your day. I love feedback. Leave me a comment with any of your thoughts. Be brutal. Doesn't bother me one bit, and I will respond. Hey, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and your week. Think about the new power that you have and what you're going to do with it. Appreciate your time. See you in the next video. Peace and love.